Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good day everyone! Today, we're going to talk about independent clause. Have you heard of independent clause? Are you ready to learn it? Good! Before we dive into the materials, let me introduce our team members. The first one is me, Sheilma Arivah Zayyan, and I will introduce you to independent clause. And then the second speaker is Diah Ayu Istiqomah, and she will talk about the types of independent clause. The third speaker is Putri Tinda Rohmasari, and she will explain about the relation between independent clause and dependent clause. And then the last speaker is Misbahul Ulum, and he will talk about the punctuation usage within the sentences. Moving on to the first material, we will talk about what is independent clause. As you might have known, clause itself is a group of words that contain a subject and a verb. There are two important types of clause, and they are dependent clause and independent clause. In this video, we will learn more about independent clause. What is an independent clause? As a clause, independent clause obviously contains subject and verb. But what differs independent clause from dependent clause is the independence itself. Being independent means that it can stand on its own. Independent clause does not need to be joined to any other clauses because it contains all the information necessary to be a complete sentence. Independent clauses have three components. The first one is a subject. A subject gives information on what the sentence is about. And then the second one is an action or predicate. It gives information on what the subject is doing. And then the third one, it expresses a complete thought. It means that it gives information on what is happening on the sentence.
The types of independent clause. The types of independent clause terdiri dari 3 macam, yakni transitive verb, intransitive verb, and linking verb. Transitive verb is a verb that can take a direct object. In other words, the action of a transitive verb is done to someone or something. An independent clause with transitive verb is to explain about the subject doing action to direct object. For the example, Tina bought a new laptop. Tina as a subject, bought as an action, and a new laptop as a direct object. And then the professor explained the materials of study. I read books. And then intransitive verb. Intransitive verb is a verb that do not have a direct object. Or in other words, intransitive verb is subject doing action to indirect object. Independent clause with intransitive verb to explain about the subject doing action without touching direct object. For the example, they went to Surabaya. My mother came home. Then linking verb. Independent clause with the linking verb is to explain that the subject has a certain description. To that description, a complement the subject is needed, namely subject of complement. Subject complement can be pronoun, noun, adjective. Linking verb can also followed by adverb or prepositional phrase. Dalam penggunaan linking verb terdiri dari 3 macam, yakni verb of being, verb of be, and verb of sensation. Verb of being like act, continue, grow, prove. And then verb of be like is, I'm, are, was, be, been, and being. And then verb of sensation like feel, sound, look, smell, and other. For the example, the teacher is absolutely sure. Daniel feels lonely. This food is delicious. Dalam independent and dependent clause memiliki 4 macam type of sentence. Structure yang terdiri dari simple sentence, then compound sentence, and then complex sentence, and compound complex sentence. Simple sentence contains a subject and a verb, and it may also have an object and modifiers. However, it contains only one independent clause. For example, C word. she as a subject, and word as a verb. Then compound sentence. Compound sentence contain at least two independent clauses. These two independent clauses can be combined with a comma and a coordinating conjunction or with a semicolon. For example, I like strawberry juice and Lina likes iced tea. Jova went to work but John went to the party. Complex sentence. A complex sentence contains at least one independent clause and at least one dependent clause. Dependent clauses can refer to the subject, who, which, the sequence or time signs while, or the causal element, because if, of the independent clause. If a sentence begins with a dependent clause, not the comma after this clause. If, on the other hand, the sentence begins with an independent clause, there is not a comma separating the two clauses. For example, no man goes before his time, unless the boy leaves early. A compound complex sentence. A compound complex sentence contains at least two independent clauses and at least one dependent clause. For example, she completed her literature review, but she still needs to work on her method section, even though she finished her method course last semester.
Independent clause in a sentence. Link to a dependent clause with a subordinating conjunctions. Common one are I'll talk, if, because, etc. Example, if I held you any closer, I would be on the other side of you. The dependent clause is linked to the independent one with the subordinating conjunction if. 2. Link to another independent clause with a semicolon. Semicolon can connect to independent clause without using a coordinating conjunction. Example, the trees are beautiful. It is autumn here. 3. Turn from dependent clause with independent marker word. Independent marker words are another way to connect clause. These words are used at the beginning of an independent clause. Examples, if she leave is not complete sentence. Jadi harus ditambah therefore. Jadi therefore she leave is a complete sentence. And 4. Dependent clause are complete by adding independent clause to the sentence. We usually place comma after the dependent clause if it begins with a dependent marker word. We can leave the comma out if we reverse the order of the clause. Examples, because the girl laughed, I smiled. Note that this is case we can leave out of the comma. Jadi kalau komanya dihilangin jadi I smiled because the girl laughed.
Punctuation in independent clause. Here there are 4 points about punctuation in independent clause. Point 1. Use comma before an and that links to independent clause. The rule is use comma before a conjunction that joins the independent clause in compound sentence. Example, yesterday is dead and tomorrow hasn't arrived. I have just a day. I'm going to be happy in it. Point 2. Use comma with non-essential dependent clause that start with who or which or any relative pronoun for that matter. If independent clause function as an adjective essential to specify its noun. For example, my sister who lives in London was arrived. Here, the clause essential identify because the word my sister from this reader would infer that have more than one sister. And then the next example, my sister who lives in London was arrived. Here the clause is non-essential. Doesn't specify the word my sister from this without any more context for the readers. Point 3. Use comma after an adverbial dependent clause that sit before the independent clause. Don't use a comma before the clause if it follow the independent clause. For example, whenever I see you, remind me to talk to you. Then the next example with the clause at back, there is no comma. Remind me not to talk to you whenever I see you next. And then point 5, point 4, there is no more. Point 3, that problem is way more difficult to decide whether an adverbial clause is essential or non-essential that deal with an adjective clause. As the first majority of adverbial clause are essential. The example is typical issue curve with because. That example a negative. Jack didn't win because he was best player. He won because he paid the referee. In this example, Jack actually won the dependent clause because he was the best player. It made essential to distinguish from the situation below. And then the next example is Jack didn't win because he was the most worst player. In this example, Jack lost. That's explained about Jack lost because he worst player.
Okay, I think that's all the materials we can explain today. We are sorry if there are many mistakes, and we hope it is helpful for you. Thank you for your attention, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Have a good day!